Welcome back to Interview At, where we teach you how to use the Amazon leadership principles to land your dream job. And the thing I always talk about with using the leadership principles and why I use them as well, they're just a great way to deliver feedback. But two, if you understand them, you can leverage them and improve your interview performance regardless of the role, regardless of the company. In this particular case, the candidate we're talking to this week, a non-traditional role that I don't see a ton of, Marcom managers, marketing communication managers. They don't tend to come through here a lot. I get a lot of product managers, software development engineers, things like that. People who have FANG aspirations, trying to get a job at Facebook, Amazon, etc. Now, this candidate was definitely targeting one of those companies, but has a background in marketing communications and is coming from a consumer packaged goods company. So definitely not a traditional route into tech. And so what you're going to see here is the ability to apply the leadership principles to someone trying to take their experiences and wrap their stories the right way and deliver them in an effective way, regardless of the question. In this case, what we're talking about is delivers results. And the question that I asked was, of all of the achievements, this particular candidate's resume had a bunch of stats and metrics about overperformance. And I said, of all of these things that you've listed out, which of these did you feel were most out of reach? So it'd be a good conversation to kind of watch how someone who's not a traditional tech employee who's trying to break into tech talk about their experiences and some of the feedback that I gave as to how to rethink their structure and how they deliver that content to seem like a better fit for the type of role.
Back to the stats, though, it is an impressive collection of stats, front and center, right? And so of all of them, how do I want to ask this question? Yeah, I guess, you talked about which one is most important to you in terms of how it changed your work. And so, and that's, we'll come back to that. Now I'm really curious to know, of these, at the time that you initiated or at the outset of the project that ultimately led to this career achievement, this data that you're sharing in your resume, which of these 8 or 9 of these bullets at the time when you set the goal, when you initiated the project, seemed to be the most unachievable or the most unrealistic that you had in front of you?
I would say it was my work with all the different spokespeople that I worked with there. I didn't set out to media train or message train these 60 individuals. I started small, and I would engage a spokesperson here or there for different programs, etc. But when I looked back in my time there and started, counting up all the work that I had done with varying spokespeople in the 6 years, I was like, oh, 60 spokespeople, that's a kind of impressive number. Didn't know that was possible.
So, okay, so that is the end. You can kind of sense that's the end of her initial part of her answer. There's a couple of key things here as an interviewer that I'm going to zero in on. One, how confident is this candidate in delivering their answer, right? Does it feel like they're delivering something that they have mastery over, or that they're really not sure about, that maybe they're recalling weirdly, or maybe not with a high degree of confidence because, well, maybe I didn't do the work, or there's a variety of kind of signals that are coming through in this answer, which don't give me as the interviewer a lot of confidence that this person really can stand by these results and they feel very strongly about the work here. But one of the things that I often talk about is how to have good structure in your answers. And a very easy way to think about this is lots of people have talked about. There's plenty of videos on YouTube about the STAR structure: situation, task, action, result, right? And when I talk about to the candidates who come through Interview At about thinking about their structure, breaking it down, your story, into 3 constituent parts. Your situation task is kind of act 1, the action is act 2, and the results is act 3. And the reason you do this is to kind of break up the answer, and that's fine. But another reason why you do this is to make sure that you're delivering on the promise of the content for situation and task. And in this specific answer, the candidate spoke a little bit about 60 influencers, and it was a large project, but I don't really know I don't know why the project was started. I don't know what the initial goal targets were. I don't know what made starting this project within this company or within this industry, vertical, whatever, so overwhelming or daunting or made it seem like a big deal. how did they think about evolving the project over time? Like, was it start small and they're going to have big aspirations? Was it start small, we'll see how it goes, we're not even sure. But there's a lot of clear, logical follow-on questions related to just the situation and task that a non-lazy interviewer is likely to either ask or want to know about. And failing to deliver on that promise, to even provide sufficient meat to get a hook into as an interviewer and ask follow-on questions, it's setting you up to fail as a candidate, right? Because you're not saying enough, which, if I'm lazy, I'm just like, well, okay, this person's no good, and I'm going to move on. But if I'm an inquisitive interviewer, I might poke at things. But if I have to poke too much, I start questioning the ability to communicate. I start questioning the ability to do the work. I start questioning how much of responsibility for the work did they actually drive versus they were just a passenger. So you're opening a can of worms that you really don't want to by not having a sufficiently well thought through piece of content for each of those sections, right? Your situation, task, etc. And so the easy fix here is just think of the questions that you might have asked yourself if you were giving this answer. What would you ask someone else who you were interviewing? And if you can't come up with that list of questions, that's a broader discussion. But just kind of spend a little bit of time adding on to what you say here, because this as a setup it's just anemic and it's not going to get there.
So I guess at the outset, did you have a specific number of spokespeople that you were trying to target? And when you then counted it up, you were surprised that the number was so high, or was it that there was no baseline presumption in terms of how big the program was supposed to get, and then you were caught off guard by how big it got?
There was no baseline, so I was pleasantly surprised when I tallied the work.
And so looking.
Okay. So you can hear that I'm already in that part, moving on to the follow-on question because of the answer. It's a very brief answer, which brief answers are fine. They're fine. But like, if I, as the interviewer, hear your answer, especially one like this, where the question specifically was, did you have baseline targets laid out? No. Essentially what the answer was. Why? That's a logical question. And so this is a case, again, now two kind of pieces of answers in a row from this candidate, where you can definitely sense that there's an opportunity to dramatically improve the content that you're delivering within the context of your interview by simply thinking through what are logical questions that someone's going to ask when I give this answer. And a lot of times this has more to do with a lack of preparation because you kind of are doing an extemporaneous or an improvisational response to questions that you hadn't anticipated, which is, that's normal. And I talk a lot about through my other videos how to prepare a little bit better. But if you're just going to restrict your answer to really, really, really content-free information, and you're not answering basic questions, like in this case, like, why didn't you do this? As an interviewer, at some point, you just kind of flip the bit and you say, this person's no good, they're not going to work for this company. And you haven't, it's your content that hasn't delivered, not your work experience, right? And it's a good bet that you could improve on your standing or how you show up in the interview if you just add a bit more content, thinking through some of the logical questions that you might get asked as you give your answer.
Back on it, what would make that seem so unachievable to you now?
Well, look at
just as a practical matter, notice how we're at the third question and she didn't really answer the first question. So this happens a lot in interviews a lot too, where people will start rambling through their answer and they forget the prompt, right? So a quick tip here, if you're doing an interview, even if you're in person, but certainly when you're face to face and you can't tell that I have a pen and paper in front of me, right? You can't see that. Write down the question just so you remember the prompt so that you kind of remind yourself, did I answer the question?
At any given company and how many spokespeople that they have related to them. I mean, if you're looking to, Facebook, for example, they really only, it's Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg, and now more Adam Mosseri here and there. But most companies have a handful of people that are, given the ability or given the permission to speak on behalf of the brand, right? So given the varying products that Subway offers, whether it's grocery delivery, our e-com products, our different, varying private label food brands sold exclusively in our stores, obviously someone speaking to the street, that's a leadership position, someone speaking to CSR goals, etc. You know, you've got to find different subject matter experts within your organization that can not only, you know, become brand storyteller on behalf of the business, but speak effectively to media. And that's a very special skill set. Not everyone can do that. So finding that kind of level of people and then working with your company to get to, you know, hit that. I mean, no one was trying to hit the number of 60, right? But just working with your organization to allow for a growing number of people to be able to speak on behalf of the brand.
And was this?
This is actually a kind of pivot point in the discussion where the candidate actually started to deliver better on the promise of the questions being asked. Because notice here how the answer largely shifted, or the quality of the content shifted. This was a much more meaty, a little bit more dive deep into what the challenges were that as a team they were faced in setting this up, right? You have a varying number of subject matter experts who could speak on behalf of the brand. Okay, fine. That seems hard. They had to organize it across not just kind of, the private food label brands, but also, you've got e-commerce as a platform and private label food brands, the major brand, the kind of overriding brand of the grocery. So there's a lot of kind of interconnected stories here, and wrangling all of these various people who could potentially speak on behalf of the brand and turning that into an effective program that drives results. That is a multifaceted and very complex problem that is now starting to take shape. But at this point, we're already a handful of minutes into the question and the interview, and it's taken a little too long to get here. It's recoverable, right? Clearly, as you're seeing the content get better, but these are things you need to think about as you're delivering your content, right? The setup was a little bit weak. The action here, much, much stronger, right? It's much, much stronger for a level of appropriateness for this candidate. Could be improved, but definitely better than how it was started.
Something that you specifically did, and this is going to sound weird asking, but was it all you, or was it you and a team of people that were ultimately training the 60?
Yeah. So
if you can correctly identify the leadership principles as you're preparing for your story, as you're doing your story prep, right? If you prepare your stories, mapping them to leadership principles, you can oftentimes guess what some of the follow-on questions are going to be, right? And Dives Deep, the goal of Dives Deep is really to understand your ability as a candidate to either lead a team or as an IC effort, individual contributor effort, to deliver large bodies of work based on deep work, right? Can you get into the nitty gritty? Can you really understand what happened, and can you extrapolate out what needs to be done, or how we should think about strategy, et cetera? What are the issues, right? And did you do that alone, or did you do that with a team, right? That's a logical follow-up question. Was this massive single person effort that you did, or was this effort that, we needed a team, and it was a calculated large scale effort. Yeah, we all worked together, but I led the team, and here's how I kept us on pace, blah, 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 right? These are all things. But these are logical follow-on questions that if you anticipate them, your delivery then becomes that much stronger.
And I would work with different agency partners on training. Obviously, I drove strategy and key messaging. But yeah, no, we would pull in different media trainers for different events or uses, etc. And then I also developed kind of an internal speaker training program that I personally delivered internally to different younger team members that needed to ramp up their speaking skills, public speaking skills. So it was a mix.
Back to the stats, though. It is.
Okay, so let me kind of deal with how that ended up, and then we'll jump into the assessment of the candidate. So with the results, Results as a word should direct the mind to numbers. What were the outcomes, right? But in this specific instance, talking about events and talking about influencers, talking about programs, how many events did they run? How many per year? How many spokespeople did they have that they needed to train, or per event, or whatever? What were the net positive outcomes to the company as a result of doing all this work? In the absence of that information, as an interviewer, I will start to conclude either A, you don't know what you're doing, because you're just kind of doing things, you don't have an objective or a goal in mind, and therefore it's hard for you to judge success, and therefore you're not a value-added member of the team. B, you didn't do the work, and therefore that's why you don't know the answers. Like, that's why you're not thinking about the results, because you were just kind of a worker bee, doing what you were told to do, but not necessarily guiding things. Which, by the way, the more junior you are, that's fine. But this person was a bit more senior, and she said she was driving the work. So if you say you're driving it, then you're responsible for the metrics, and you should know the metrics. And so that's where this answer sort of fell apart for delivers results, right? Because the results are about results. Did you deliver them? What were they? How did your results measure up against what you anticipated you would be able to do when at the outset of the project, or maybe as you adjusted as you went, as you got closer to launch, you kind of rationalized expectations around what you thought you could do. Did you succeed based on what you thought you would do versus, well, I'm gonna make up a number. We sold $1 million extra worth of food. Is that good? I don't know. I have no idea. And so the content here would have been meaningfully improved, especially the results section, when you think about the star format, with actual numbers, and it just didn't land. So that was a bit of a challenge. But given where the person, where this candidate was kind of leveled out, and where they were, the type of role that they were targeting, forgivable-ish sin, because they were a bit more junior than maybe a mid-level or a more senior person. But if you're gonna stake the claim that you drove it, you should probably know the results. So let's read the assessment that would have been read into the room for this candidate had they been on a real loop. Deliver results. Of all the leadership principles, this was the best showing for the candidate. The example used to walk through a program that was built showed leadership, process, and an outcome, potentially a set of outcomes, although we noted the numbers were missing, that were positive for the company, stated, but no actual numbers. This is all surface area that the candidate should consider covering when using this example in a future interview. There are desired details highlighted in the notes, which suggests ways in which the candidate could have expanded on this effort, which we've talked about in this video. The lack of structure and details is what was hurting the candidate in this answer block, and ultimately what would, de-level a person, kind of push them down in the perception of their abilities, but ultimately in a hiring decision, you would probably say not inclined, because just there are too many of these within the context. Now, here's the good news. The reason we do mock interviews, when you have someone who can give valuable feedback and feedback that is actionable, is because many of the things that I see, and I've done now well over 100 of these mock interviews in the last 18 months, what I see over and over again is poor preparation of the stories without kind of specifics, structure, and data for results presents very poorly. Those are fixable things with preparation, right? Those are very fixable things with preparation, rather than, wow, this person was this is the Icarus of job applicants, reaching way too high, got too close to the sun, burned, crashed, didn't make it, right? That's not going to work. And that I've seen a few of those, right, where people are just reaching way too high for the level they're targeting and their abilities. But more often than not, just a little bit of work in preparation can dramatically improve how you present in your interview. So that's just a little side note. So if you would like a free mock interview, you can always sign up for one at interview@.com. I do have a limited number of free spots that I allocate every week, and I'm happy to do these for free because I just genuinely like helping people. If you find this content useful, I appreciate you clicking the like button or going ahead and subscribing and just letting me know that you want to see more of it. I do enjoy making it, but it's always nice to get the little confetti in the studio YouTube app that lets me know, hey, more people like your stuff, which is really, really cool.